Does it hurt? Everything hurts when you watch Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, because it's an incredibly torturous, painful cinematic experience. This was easily the worst film that I've seen so far this year, and honestly, one of the most depressing, sad, pathetic films that I've seen in a theater in a long, long time. And before I go any further and completely demolish the Dial of Destiny, I want to give a special shout out to Brett for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see or hear me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, if I sound a little bit tired or worn out, or my voice gets a little raw throughout this video, it's fitting because this franchise at this point is tired and worn out. It's about as tired and worn out as Indy's had. And they waited way too goddamn long to make this movie. And it really does show because Harrison can barely do anything. Say whatever you want about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Harrison was still in good enough shape to be able to actually do a lot of stunts and actually be somewhat believable when it comes to physicality. Here, is just not able to do as much. So he punches a few people, maybe he rides a horse, and spends most of the film like driving a car or just shuffling around or slowly crawling up a rock face because Harrison's 80 years old. So right from the beginning, this was just a bad idea. This was instant regret. And I'm going to repeat that throughout this video because it's a fitting term to apply to this film. This movie might as well be called Indiana Jones and the Instant Regret. Because this is just one of those films where it's just a one moment of instant regret after another. It starts with the fact that the film was just made out of pure desperation because Disney was flailing and floundering when it comes to their box office receipts and their financial coffers. The pandemic hurt them really bad. Post pandemic, they weren't doing as well as they would have hoped. Um, the theme parks were underperforming. Their tentpole franchises like Marvel and Pixar were also underperforming or outright tanking in the box office. Disney Plus didn't do as well as they wanted it to. So they were desperate. What do you do when you're desperate? You look for something that is an easy cash grab. You look for something that you can produce, put into theaters that can be an instant source of revenue. And Disney looked back at their history and were like, hey, we did this with Star Wars, with The Force Awakens, and we made a shit ton of money. So you know what? What's the next best thing that we have that we haven't done a film of, and there hasn't been a movie of in theaters in a long time? Indiana Jones. But Disney was as naive as I was when it comes to this film possibly being good and failed to realize that audiences didn't really necessarily want to see this film. And they were also very leery and aware of what Disney and Lucasfilm in particular, due to their recent track record, would probably do to the movie, or due to the franchise, or due to the character of Indiana Jones, and do some more deconstructing bullshit. So they were like, nah, I'll pass. Maybe I'll wait till it's on Disney Plus. I don't need to see 80-year-old Indiana Jones in the theater. No thanks. It was a Hail Mary. And like most Hail Marys in every NFL season, it didn't get completed. And it's one of those things too where they felt that they were going to get fortune and glory with this. They really genuinely felt that way because of their success with Force Awakens. They're like, we did it before, we'll do it again. We'll get fortune and glory. We'll get $1 billion worldwide box office because Indiana Jones is a very popular franchise. And then we'll get the glory because people will forget about King of the Crystal Skull and they'll remember Dial of Destiny and they'll remember Disney for resurrecting Indiana Jones. But instead, a lot of people are just going to remember Disney for essentially putting Indiana Jones in his own tomb. So the film is directed by James Mangold. And James Mangold was, to me personally, not necessarily a bad pick. He's a talented director. He definitely knows his way around a camera. He can direct action sequences fairly well, as evident in films like Logan or Night and Day. He can definitely provide some genuine spectacle or sizzle when it comes to the visuals with Logan and other films in his filmography, like Ford v Ferrari. So he's a good director. And he had a good track record leading up to this. But for whatever reason, his direction is just lackluster and forgettable and dull. And just doesn't really have the same energy or spirit or passion as a lot of his other films in his filmography. This is easily like the worst effort that I've seen from James Mangold. And part of me is wondering if it's like a Disney thing. They wouldn't let him go outside the box when it comes to his direction. But I don't necessarily buy that's the case. I think he just didn't really necessarily want to do this movie. Disney just essentially offered him a blank check and were like, hey, how much do you want to direct Indiana Jones 5? If we can afford it, we'll give it to you. And I was like, sure. And it kind of makes sense when it comes to how overly defensive he is when it comes to this movie, because deep down, even he realizes that this wasn't his best effort. Because it's just such a flat, lifeless film most of the time visually. And when it's not flat and lifeless and looking like a streaming show, it has sequences that just drag on way too long or just too short and too choppy. If I can speak. Sorry, just talking about the film just drains me of not only my energy or my soul, but my ability to say words clearly. So yeah, there are so many scenes that are just too short or too choppy or too lengthy and needed a trim or needed something in terms of variety to really kind of break them up a little bit, make them feel a little bit less monotonous when it comes to the visuals. There's just a lot of sequences where even some of the camera angles are a bit awkward or the shot selections. Like the action scenes in particular, like other than maybe a couple moments with the tuk-tuk chase in Morocco, the action in this film is just very lethargic and just about as slow and lumbering as Harrison Ford is at age 80. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe Mangold was trying to match the film with Harrison's average foot pace. I don't know, but if that was the case, that was a bad call. And other than maybe some emotional scenes, like some nice little tender scenes with Indiana bearing his soul on the boat with Helena, when he's talking about what he might have done if he could go back in time, or the bit with Marion and Indy at the end of the movie. The direction is just completely 100% unimpressive. Even when it comes to showcasing the settings of like Morocco or Greece, or even the opening sequence that takes place during the time of World War II, even that looked very just bland and dull, and nothing really that special or spectacular or anything that really warranted like a theatrical release, or a budget as big as this film's budget wound up being. Like even the stuff that you have near the end with Archimedes' tomb, like even that was like, eh. I think Steven Spielberg did a better job showcasing the tomb of the Crystal Skull in the last film. So I know Spielberg himself has said that Mangold did a good job. You know, that's fine. I don't think he would ever say otherwise, because that's just how it is in Hollywood. But I don't think he did that great of a job. Just at best, average. At worst, way below that. And I know he's capable of better, and I know he can do better than this. So that's what makes it even more disappointing. It's like, I know Mangold can do a better job. It's almost like his doppelganger, James Mangler, directed this. It wasn't James Mangold, it was Mangler. Now, speaking of Mangold, the script by the Butterworth twins, past his prime David Coop and James Mangold, is easily, without a doubt to me, the weakest and worst aspect of this film. This is a mangled mess. And before I really delve deep into the depths of the disgrace, depravity, and sheer dumbassery of this screenplay, I want to give it some praise. Because it's not all bad, in all honesty. It's mostly bad, it's mostly terrible, but it's not all bad. I think the way that it handles Indiana Jones's intelligence, his use of his skills, I think that's rather well done. When it comes to him finding clues and figuring out puzzles and deciding what to do next, that is something that, for the most part, is handled with care, with a lot of respect, feels closer in line with what I honestly expect out of an Indiana Jones story. So that part of it, not bad. I also don't mind the more emotional moments with Indiana, like the bit on the boat with Helena where he's talking about if he could go back in time, he would try to stop his son from going to the war. Um, I also like the ending with Indy and Marion and how it takes an iconic, memorable, fan favorite scene in Raiders and turns it around. I thought it was rather sweet and charming, even though there was an obvious reshoot. It was still a good scene. I think the writing was good there. I think the writing was good too in that other sequence on the boat. Provided some really nice lines of dialogue for Harrison to say in character. I think, speaking of characters, Sala is written decently enough. I don't think he's handled with a lot of disgrace or disdain. Uh, yeah, he's a cab driver, but I didn't really feel he was portrayed as too much of a loser. Would have liked to have seen him in the film more. I would have loved to have seen Sala go on an adventure with Indy one last time instead of his annoying goddaughter, but that's a whole other thing entirely. But what you have with Sala, it's, it's not spectacular, but it's not terrible. It's not stupendously shitty or anything. So, I think they did a decent enough job with Sala. And even the villain, Voller, there's some interesting aspects to him. specifically the fact that America hired him and other Nazis to give them a leg up in the space race. And that creates some intriguing questions about morality. I don't think the script really delves into a lot of that stuff that deeply, but it does make an attempt, does kind of touch the surface. And I want to give it a little bit of credit for that. Gives Voller a little bit of depth, not enough, because that character is super thin. And I don't mind the MacGuffin, the Antikythera. I think it's kind of cool. I think using mathematics and taking what actually is a real artifact and adding this whole time travel aspect to it is interesting. I think the fact that it can only go one place, that makes it work better for me. Because it's kind of stretching things a bit when it comes to this franchise in terms of credibility or believability. And I know it's not really based on reality, but like time travel, like when you get to that point, you're like, oh, really? Really gonna go there? But you hear the way that they do it, like, okay, all right, I could deal with it. Plus, I like the fact that Indiana has the opportunity to witness history himself. I think there are other aspects of that are absolutely abysmal when it comes to the writing, but just the stuff where he just gets to witness history, I don't mind that. As somebody who studied history and or world history and art history, I think that's kind of cool. Um, and I don't mind some bits of action. Like I don't mind some of the tuk tuk chase, and I actually kind of liked the casino hotel scene, despite like the capitalism line and some of the other stuff. But I kind of didn't mind that sequence, and that was kind of entertaining. Um, and having eels underwater, it's a nice replacement for snakes. Even though the execution of that scene wasn't really the best, and I think the idea was at least there. But I mean, other than that, I got nothing because everything else is just more shit piled on top of extra shit. Um, and at the top of the shit pile is the character of Helena Shaw. I hated this character so much. I wanted Indiana Jones to throw her ass off the boat and just finish the rest of the movie with Antonio Banderas. This fucking character is insufferable. And I know that's actually the point, because the point is to make this character incredibly selfish, vain, unlikable, because throughout the film she has an arc where she learns the error of her ways and changes her perspective on things and becomes a better person. That's fine in theory, but in execution, it's a total failure because all you get is mostly her being an insufferably selfish, vain twat for 95% of the running time until she just out of nowhere starts having a different personality. So it never really feels like a completed arc. And I don't know what it is with these characters in a lot of these Lucasfilm films. Why do they have these female characters who are this obnoxiously written, where they are so snide and snippy and just smug and in ways that just feel so artificial and fake, like just constantly belittling Indiana Jones, mentioning his age, saying things like "you're out of your depth, Jonesy," or "oh, like I should be taking advice from an aging grave robber," or the whole bit where Indiana's understandably upset. He's upset at Helena because he doesn't understand why Helena would be acting a certain way to Indy, let alone other people, because he knows her father. And so he asks her, like, how did you end up like this? And then she's like, what? Resourceful, daring, beautiful, self-sufficient. It's like, that doesn't make the character endearing. It doesn't make the character entertaining. It just makes you want to find a way to cause the character to crash their tuk-tuk into the nearest wall and be knocked unconscious. That's what lines like that do. And they don't come across as anything that anyone would really say. So there comes the just fake quality of it. They got to prop the character up to make it so the character is actually some really strong, independent, strong woman. And you got to do it with a screenwriter who's just trying way too hard. And you can see it on screen. And it just really carries over to everything else of the character. Like, the character just has so many of these moments where there's just so much overcompensating. She's a Jane of all trades, but a master of none as a result. Because, oh, she's this and that and this, and then she's also this. But none of it really is at all believable. None of it really feels like it's earned or anything that really feels like it sticks. So you just have a character that insists upon themselves and just is always present throughout most of the movie, but in a way that's not enjoyable and not likable and by design. Like, what kind of script is this? What kind of decision is that? Like, that's just sheer insanity. That's the kind of thing you only throw in there if you actively want to sabotage something or torpedo the entire production with her bug eyes. That's other things. This is random stuff that's just awkward. Like that scene with the bug eyes of the kid at the university where she says mathematics and then goes, it's like, stop staring at me with those bug eyes. And no, I'm not apologizing. Or just the random moments where she's like flirting with guys out of nowhere, or the whole bit with the dynamite, or just how out of touch she is. Like, she blows up the boat with the dynamite, helps Indy and the kid Teddy escape from Waller and his men, and then is hooting and hollering and like, oh yeah, and then Indy's like, hey, my friend just died. She's like, oh, sorry. It's just I mean, there's even a line of dialogue where her character flat out says, I'm not selling this, am I? I'm like, no, you're not. You're not selling this character at all. And that's just a problem with so much of the script, like not selling these characters. You're not selling Teddy, poor man, short round, because he just feels like an equally as annoying extension of the worst qualities of Helena. It's always just being irritating and annoying and trying to be funny and failing, and then having the same just random ability to do shit that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But he's just able to do it because, oh, he's Helena's helper. So now he's got the ability to fly a plane that he's never flown before. Or he can swim underwater well enough to trap a guy underwater with handcuffs, even though earlier in the film he said he can't swim at all. Uh, stuff like that. But yeah, just didn't like that character either. They just did a bad job writing that character. Then the whole scene with Helena and that character when they're at Greece, And he's like, why are we taking orders from that guy? I thought we were running the show. I was like, oh, we are. It's like, I thought we were going to be in this for all the wrong reasons. I'm like, yeah, you are. That's another thing. The script is in it for the wrong reasons. In it for a paycheck, and in it for the same lazy, uninspired bullshit that you've seen in so many of these other films lately when it comes to Lucasfilm. And that brings me to another point. The moments where it tries to subvert expectations. And it subverts these expectations in ways that are just completely, totally not what they think. Like the writers think that they're being unpredictable. They're doing something different by having Indiana Jones as an old man in his underwear who is angry at the tenants downstairs for playing their music too loud. And him being a loser, lives in a ramshackle apartment and is dealing with a divorce with Marion and is retiring and is doing lectures to audience members who don't give a shit about him and are bored by his presence. They think that, they're doing something different there, but they're not. This is just following the same bullshit formula as a lot of these other movies have done under the Lucasfilm banner. So it's not subverting expectations at all. For me and for a lot of other people, it is the expectation, sadly. So that I don't get. I don't get that when it comes to, oh, we're subverting expectations and we're doing something different. Even ties into like that ending of the movie where Indiana Jones, he's the damsel in distress, and Helena has to be the one that does most of the heavy lifting to try to save him. Even though, yes, he does get involved and shoots a Nazi and gets the parachute and all of that, you have a lot of this stuff going up, building to that involves Helena up front and center a lot more. And Indiana spends the majority of the climax just sitting on his ass and doesn't really do anything. I mean, there's even a scene where he has a gun. It's not a signature revolver, by the way, but he has a gun. And he shoots the gun and he misses every shot. Misses every single shot. Doesn't even hit a single person. I know he's an older guy, but Indy's a crack shot. So that's lame. Closest he ever gets to a shot or a target is himself. Because he's the one that gets shot. Just thrilling stuff, isn't it? And yeah, the whole stuff where Indy wants to be a part of history and wants to stay behind, and then he has to get punched in the face by Helena in order for him to go back to his own time. It's forced. It's as forced as somebody punching you in the face. And that doesn't even go into the Waller's plan, which subverts expectations in a different way, because going into this film, you're not expecting the plan to be as dumb as it winds up being. His plan is, so that's like the one time that it actually successfully subverts expectations, is when it comes to just how incredibly idiotic Waller's plan is. All right, I'm going to get the Dial of Destiny. I'm going to go back to the time of World War II in Germany during the peak of the war, pre-war, whatever. I'm going to kill Hitler. Then somehow I'm going to take over, or there are going to be people who are going to be put into place who are going to take over, and they're going to listen to me. And they're not going to think I'm crazy and I'm full of shit. And they're not going to want to kill my ass because I killed the Fuhrer. Like, it's incredibly idiotic. It's so stupid. When you think about it for like 5 seconds, you're like, that's your plan? It's not a great plan. So, and that doesn't even count continental drift or whatever's, going on with that. But like, so the plan is stupid. The plan is dumb. So it makes the villain look like a total fucking moron. Really takes away a lot of the menace. And then even the comeuppance for the villain sucks. He crashes in a plane in the most just boring way possible. You see his body all burned up later. It looks like a CGI, so it doesn't. Oh, so it's not even practical? If it is practical, it didn't look that good. So it's not even a memorable demise for the villain. I mean, it's bad enough that you had Voller getting hit in a cartoonish fashion, falling off the train earlier in the movie. Now you got him crashing in a plane into CGI land. Like, what a waste. And it's not just him. The other villains suck too. Like the guy played by Holbrook, who's the dude with the mustache who just for some reason wants to shoot everything and acts like a total dunce, or the big hulking brute who is set up to be like, Pat Roach, the mechanic in Raiders, or the thuggy cult guy in the converter, and I mean not the converter, the conveyor belt in Temple of Doom, or somebody like Vogel in The Last Crusade, or the Russian who got punched into ants in King of the Crystal Skull. And he doesn't even fight the guy. There's no big fight with the guy at the end of the movie. The guy just throws Indy around like a rag doll, and then the guy just drowns. He gets defeated by the fucking kid. So even that's bad. And that's easy. And this script fails at one of the easiest things. To have like the big brute, the big hulking physical specimen who Indy finds a way to kick their ass by the end of the movie. So yeah, it's just such a bad script on so many different levels. It's bad at subverting expectations, except for when it comes to successfully subverting expectations in the wrong way. It's chock full of instant regret when it comes to characterization and how characters are written and the motivations of certain characters, or in other lapses in logic. Like, okay, Indiana Jones goes back to his own time and he gets back with Marion, but isn't he technically still framed for murder? So it's not. It looks like he's still screwed. And on top of that, you have other stuff like there's this whole FBI character who is like this. I almost seem like a Black Panther, like militant type, calling one of Voller's men a cracker and all of that. And this character is completely pointless. The character is there, and she's supposed to, I think, be like someone who's kind of a kind of an antithesis of Voller and his men. Um, but like, yeah, Agent Mason. She's the CIA agent who works for Voller and his men, but like, just barely any screen time, barely anything to her character. And then she dies, and they're like, okay, who cares? Why was this character in the movie? Then you got other characters that are kind of there, like Basil, but honestly, really still not really anything that great. The character just feels like, oh, this is some friend of Indiana Jones's that we've never even heard of until this movie. And that's another problem with this script. You have so many characters where like, who the hell is this? Who is this? Like, now he has a goddaughter named Helena. Where did this come from? And speaking of Helena and the goddaughter thing, why even have that? Just bring Short Round in there. I mean, or Short Round's kid or something. We didn't even need Helena to begin with. And one more thing about Helena, the way that she's written, she's so resourceful and so daring and so beautiful and so strong that, I mean, does she even really need Indiana Jones? You just flesh some things out with the script and give her some more contacts, and she doesn't even need Indiana Jones in an Indiana Jones movie. But they had to have Indiana Jones in there because you can't sell Helena Shaw and the Dial of Destiny, because the box office would have been even lower. So Yeah, I mean, wow. What a absolutely just terrible, just god awful script. Now, the oh, I didn't even speaking of god awful, I didn't even I forgot. I forgot about Antonio Banderas' character who was like longtime friends with Indiana Jones, who's in it for like 5 minutes. Ronaldo, 5 minutes, and then he gets shot and dies. Yeah, I forgot about the character because the character was that forgettable. It was that much of an afterthought when it comes to the writers. But yeah, speaking of Banderas, might as well talk about the cast. I mean, Harrison Ford's the headliner, and I will say out of the entire cast, he's the one that delivers the best performance. It's not on par with what he brought to the screen with the other four, but there's still some moments where you get that charm, you get that charisma that only Harrison can bring to the character. And you can tell that he did enjoy it. He was up for it. You know, he didn't necessarily sleepwalk his way through the film. I don't necessarily buy that. I think, you know, he did what he could, which wasn't a ton because, you know, he's up there in age. There's not a whole lot he could do. I think the way that something like Blade Runner 2049 was set up, you know, it gave him a little bit more to do, better arc for his character, but and worked around his age in a way that was a little more effective. Because Deckard was never really the kind of adventurer or action hero type, but Indiana Jones is like an action hero, and like he's 80 years old, can't really do a whole lot. So I don't really blame Harrison. You know, he did what he could, and he definitely did, you know, deliver a decent performance. There were some good lines of dialogue, some good bits of acting from him. Um, and I think he made the most that he possibly could out of a bad script. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, though, I just, God damn, what a bad, just shitty performance. Just crap of the highest order. She's mugging to the camera way too much, making weird facial expressions. You don't buy her as an action heroine. You don't buy her when it comes to comedy. You don't buy her having charisma, let alone a pulse. Just a bad performance. But at the same time, I'm like, well, the character is so badly written that I don't think any actress could have pulled this character off. But still, it's still a bad performance. Still something that does stand out is just definitely one of the worst things about the film. With her and her bug eyes. Mads Mikkelsen, easily one of the most disappointing things about this cast. It's not a bad performance. It's just he has a nothing role, and he's just a perfect actor to play a villain in an Indiana Jones film, and he's wasted. He's wasted with a absolutely paper thin character that has almost no depth to speak of except surface level qualities, and rarely even shares that many scenes with Indiana, other than maybe like the ending, like the little bit on the train, um, or at least scenes that really that really resonate with you, like the stuff with Belloc and Indiana and Raiders and stuff like that. Just he still manages to make the character a little intimidating though because he has such a undeniable presence, but man, he's got nothing. He's got nothing to work with. Speaking of nothing, Tony Banderas, nothing character. Love Antonio Banderas. I think him and Harrison actually have some decent chemistry in the few scenes that they're in, but nothing character, given next to nothing to do, and then dies anyway. So, not really much to say about that performance. John Rhys-Davies is fine as Sala. Don't really have any problems with it. Toby Jones is also fine as Basil. Boyd Holbrook and his fake ass country accent. No thanks. Um, Karen Allen. good. It's nice to see her again, but not really in it a ton. Shawnette Renee Wilson as Agent Mason. I thought she sucked. I thought her line delivery was pretty cringe, especially that line where she called Boyd Holbrook a cracker. I just thought that was laughable. And there was just a lot of other moments with her character that I just thought her performance really wasn't anything that great. And considering just how easily disposable that character is, and how honestly unimpressive her performance is, I really would like to know what it was in the original script that she had cut out when it comes to her character's demise that was so controversial and offensive. Because, I mean, it's not like the character or the performance really warranted, you know, a lot of extra rewrites or whatever. In fact, you could just written that character entirely out of the movie, and it just would have helped the film's pacing. Um, yeah, you've got Oliver Richters, who plays Hulk, the big hulking dude, who is pretty lame. Oh yeah, Ethann Isidore as Teddy, another just terrible performance, bad line delivery, just a bad actor. He sucked. He sucks. He's not just his character's not just a poor man's short round. It just is not a great actor at all. It sounded like he was reading off of fucking cue cards. And when it comes to other aspects of the film, I don't know. I mean, you got, I guess, some decent enough technical aspects, like the cinematography by Faden, Papa Michael, the editing by three guys, Michael McCusker, Andrew Buckland, and Dirk Westervelt is serviceable. The music by John Williams is nothing special, sadly, in his last Indiana Jones score. And what honestly might be one of his last scores, period, because the man is up there in age. Other than the iconic Indiana Jones staples from the franchise, none of the new music really stands out. And the film is the longest in the series to date, and it definitely does feel like it. I mean, goddamn, this is such a slow slog of a movie. Like there's large chunks of the film where not a lot of excitement is to be had, not a lot of intrigue. There's scenes that drag on way too goddamn long. There, like the first hour of the movie, there's no genuinely like memorable or consistently exciting, thrilling action. And yeah, it's just an incredibly boring, slow-paced film. I never thought that I would ever say that an Indiana Jones film was boring, but here we are. Dial of Destiny. It puts it puts the capital B in boring. It puts boring in all caps. Um, Turns the boring dial all the way up to the point where the dial breaks and it's off the scale. So I don't really know what else to say about the movie, except yeah, it was just such a depressing, just soulless, passionless movie that just didn't need to be made, didn't need to be created so people can be subjected to it. I mean, I would rather open the Ark of the Covenant and have it melt my face off while Molaram is ripping my heart out of my ass as I am drinking from the wrong grail and aliens are giving me knowledge that makes my eyes pop out of my head and causes my body to be lit on fire than ever spend the time watching this movie ever fucking again.